All right, everyone, get ready for a deep dive today. We're all about unlocking that shining from within. We've got a whole season's worth of notes on this personal development podcast from you guys. Someone's ready to level up.
What's really interesting is the range of topics you've all picked out.
Yeah.
Self-belief, setting boundaries, goals, even the heavy stuff like failure and shadow work.
It's like you laid out the whole personal growth buffet and you're ready to pile up your plate. So where do we even start?
Well, the podcast really zeroes in on self-belief as the foundation,
Yeah.
and they make it clear, shining from within, they really hammer it home. Self-belief, it's not something you're born with, it's learned.
Okay, now that is encouraging. Because I think a lot of people, myself included sometimes, you assume it's like this magical thing. Some people just hey VEE, but learned. That means anyone can build it.
Exactly. And one technique they talk about is, reframing that negative self-talk. It's like that old saying, if you wouldn't say it to a friend, don't say it to yourself.
Oh man, isn't that the truth? We are so much harder on ourselves than we would ever be to someone else. So how does this tie into boundaries? Because that was another big one in your notes.
Think of it this way. If self-belief is knowing what you're worth, boundaries are how you protect that worth.
Yeah.
Yeah. When you're interacting with others. Drawing a line saying this is what I'm okay with and this, nope.
Ooh, I like that visual, drawing a line. But it's one thing to know that intellectually. Oh, boundaries are good. It's another to actually do IT. Did the podcast give any, practical tips?
Absolutely. One thing they suggested was having a phrase ready to go. Something simple like, let me think about that, get back to you. Gives you breathing room before you just blurt out a yes out of habit.
Oh, that is good. It takes the pressure off, right? Like you don't have to have the answer perfectly formed right then and there.
Exactly. Speaking of things we need, let's talk goals. We've got our foundation, the self-belief, the boundaries, but now we need some direction. Yeah. The podcast talks about SMART goals, specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound.
Right, SMART goals. I feel like I've heard that a million times. But am I really setting goals that way? It's different doing it versus just knowing the words.
That's the key question. And Shining from Within digs into the WHY, behind needing that clear vision. It's not just checking things off a list. It's about having that drive, that fire.
It's true. Goals without the deeper why are just tasks. They don't have any of that real motivation.
Exactly. And one thing that stuck with me, Genevieve, the host, she talks about motivation like it's this little voice inside you cheering you on.
Oh, I love that. Because motivation, it's this abstract thing, right? But that makes it so much more relatable. Like we all have that little cheerleader, just got to crank up the volume sometime.
That's it. And that's where making sure your actions match your aspirations comes in. When your goals really mean something to you, that little voice, it gets a whole lot louder.
Okay, so we've got self-belief, setting SMART goals, the whole why behind it. But then your notes and the podcast, they take this turn into failure and shadow work. It's interesting.
That's what's so great about Shining from Within. They don't shy away from the messier stuff, the parts of personal growth that aren't always Instagram worthy.
Right. Because let's be real, nobody's journey is all sunshine and rainbows. So how does the podcast reframe these, well, I guess you'd say negative concepts?
Instead of fearing failure, what if we looked at it like data, like a learning curve? And shadow work, it's not some scary, intimidating thing. It's about integrating the parts of ourselves we usually hide, the parts we think are unacceptable, bad even.
Okay, I like that, but unpack that a little bit more for me, because those hidden parts, usually they're hidden for a reason, right?
Of course. But those parts, they often hold the key to breakthroughs. Think about it. Fears, insecurities, anger, they all come from somewhere, right? Deeper needs, past experiences. By understanding those, we get self-awareness. And then we can actually use C to grow, kind of like alchemy, turning lead into gold.
Alchemy, I like that. So we're not pretending those parts aren't there, but it's more like, interesting, what can I learn from this?
Yeah, exactly. Recognizing that even those shadows, they have something to teach us. Could even be the key to talents and potential we didn't even know we had.
That is way more empowering than just being scared of them. So instead of fearing our shadows, we can befriend them, learn from them. But man, all this inner work, the self-belief, the boundaries, shadow work, it's a lot. Probably why your notes, Andy, the podcast, both really emphasize self-care and gratitude.
It's not just an extra, It's crucial. Imagine running a marathon without refueling, without taking care of yourself. You'd burn out before the finish line, right? Personal growth, it's kind of the same.
And I do like that they don't just say, oh yeah, self-care, important. They give you actual stuff to try.
Right, because it's different for everyone, isn't it? For you, it might be that gratitude journal. For someone else, a walk in the park or 10 minutes just breathing. Shining from within is all about finding what really works for you.
Which brings us to gratitude, which, I'll be honest, sometimes feels almost too simple, like just be thankful. How does that actually change anything big?
It sounds simple, but it's about shifting your perspective. Instead of focusing on what's missing, you're appreciating what you've already got. That can be huge, especially when things are tough.
Choosing to see the good even when there's chaos around you?
Exactly. And a tip from the podcast that I liked, weaving it into your day, it's not about these grand gestures, just noticing, appreciating even little things.
Like those little sparks of joy, right?
Mhm.
A really good cup of coffee, a chat with a friend, even just that we have this whole community listening, learning along with us.
There you go. Perfect examples. It's a
Yeah.
practice, like a muscle you build up over time.
Okay, so we've got self-belief, boundaries, goals, embracing failure, shadow work, self-care, and gratitude. Anything else we got to cram into this already packed episode on personal growth?
One more thing that ties it all together, and it was something you highlighted a lot in your notes, motivation.
Oh, motivation. That thing that either gets us moving or keeps us totally stuck. What's the shining from within angle on that?
They're big on the idea that real motivation, it comes from inside. Not rewards, not pressure, but your values, your aspirations.
So not what someone else's says should motivate me, but what actually lights me up personally.
Exactly. And often that means some introspection, right?
Yeah.
Quiet time to figure out what really matters.
It's like that saying, your heart already knows what it wants to do. The question is, do you have the courage to follow it?
Ooh, I like that. Tapping into that inner wisdom, even if it's scary, uncertain.
Because it is scary, taking that leap, chasing those dreams. What did they say about dealing with self-doubt when it creeps in?
Shining from within gives some great tips for those moments, yeah. First off, go back to your why. Why is this goal so important? Do you really want it? Or is it what you think you should want?
Because there's a huge difference between those two, that external pressure versus that internal drive.
Huge. And when it's personal, it's way easier to keep going when things get tough. Another thing they said, break it down into tiny steps.
Makes sense. When you think about the whole massive goal, it's overwhelming. But smaller chunks.
Exactly. Less daunting. Instead of write a novel, it's write one page today. And each little win, it keeps you going.
Like a snowball, right? The more you do, the more you want to do.
That's it. And they talk about celebrating those wins no matter how small. We're so bad at that, acknowledging how far we've come.
Too busy rushing to the finish line, we forget to enjoy the journey, right?
Exactly. And that joy, it's part of what keeps you motivated for the long haul. Personal growth, it's a marathon, not a sprint.
How do we find that balance, though? Pushing for those goals, but also enjoying the ride.
One way is bringing back playfulness, humor. It doesn't always have to be serious, this self-improvement stuff. In fact, shining from within, they're big on self-compassion.
Self-compassion, yeah. Especially important when we're pushing our own boundaries, trying new things. What does that look like in this context, though?
Think about how you treat a good friend. That's how you got to treat yourself. We all mess up. Nobody's perfect at this. And that's okay.
Permission to be perfectly imperfect, as they say.
Right. When we can look at those mistakes with kindness, not just criticism, that's where the growth happens. Without the shame, the guilt trips. It's about accepting ourselves, flaws and all.
It's like we're allowed to be human, you know? We're all works in progress.
Totally. And when you accept that, that's where you find some peace. Real fulfillment.
Which, I mean, isn't that what we're all after in the end?
I think so. Being your true self, living a life that actually means something, that matches your values.
Okay, so we've covered a ton in this Shining from Within deep dive. Self-belief, boundaries, goals, messing up, shadow work, self-care, gratitude, motivation, self-compassion. Before we wrap, though, you said there was one more good bit from the podcast we should hit.
Oh yeah, they're big on tuning into something we often ignore. Intuition.
That gut feeling,
Oh.
the thing we try to logic our way out of.
Yep. Genevieve, she compares it to a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets.
Okay, I can see that. But how do you tell the difference, intuition versus just like anxiety or wishful thinking?
$1 million question, right?
Yeah,
They talk about paying attention to how it feels in your body.
yeah.
Intuition, it's calmer, more centered. Anxiety's all over the place. Journaling helps too. You start to see patterns.
Yeah. Like you're learning its language, how it speaks to you. Okay, time for what I know everyone's been waiting for. Questions. First up, Sarah asks, I love the shadow work idea, but it sounds intense. Baby steps I can take before diving in.
Sarah, so smart. You don't got to become an expert overnight. Start by just noticing your reactions during the day.
Yeah.
When do you get really triggered, like more than usual?
Those times when you're like, whoa, where did that come from?
Exactly. Instead of judging it, get curious. Say a coworker's success makes you weirdly jealous. Don't push it down. Ask yourself, what's this about? Maybe it's your own beliefs about success,
Oh, I like that. Curiosity, not judgment, like looking in the mirror instead of turning away.
Yes. Journaling is good too. Don't censor yourself. Just write whatever comes up, even if it's messy. You'll see the patterns.
Okay, Mark asks, motivation is my biggest struggle. I set goals, then I fizzle out. Help. The classic motivation roller coaster.
We've all been there. Remember that little voice analogy? Sometimes needs a megaphone. Go back to your why. Does that goal really matter to you? Or is it what you think you should want?
Because if it's not coming from inside, you're going to run out of steam way faster.
For sure. And break it down. Tiny steps. Hard to be unmotivated when the next thing is write one sentence or stretch for 5 minutes.
Small wins, big impact. Love it. Last one, Jessica asks, self-care, it's the first thing to go when I'm stressed. How do I actually make it a priority?
Oh, Jessica, you get it. So easy to be like, overwhelmed, better cancel that massage. But here's the thing. It's not selfish. It's essential.
The fuel that lets us be our best selves everywhere else, too, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
The podcast said schedule it in, like an appointment you can't miss. Sorry, got to meditate, can't do coffee. Plus, it doesn't have to be fancy.
Not all spa days and whatnot. Setting boundaries, I self-care, saying no, getting enough sleep, things that protect your energy.
Exactly. Even 5 minutes, breathing, a walk, it all makes a difference.
Those little things that make you feel more like you again.
And it's different for everyone. Experiment. Find what works.
This has been amazing. So much covered today, but that's the thing about personal growth, right? It never really ends.
It's a journey, always learning, changing, becoming. Like Shining from Within says, we can all grow, we can transform. It's in us.
It is. So as you're trying these things, be patient. It takes time. You're going to have setbacks. That's okay.
It happens. Every challenge is a chance to learn something.
That's the spirit. Curiosity, compassion, a little humor along the way. You got this, everyone.
And remember, we're all in this together. Keep shining.